Rory, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey podcast today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm glad to have you here as well. Can you tell myself and the audience a little bit of background about who you are and why you do what you do?
Of course. So I'm Rory Innes. I am the founder and CEO of the Cyber Helpline. We are a charity that provides free expert help to victims of cybercrime and online harm, individuals and families who've fallen victim online. And I do that because I saw firsthand the huge gap in support for victims, how hard it is when you don't understand IT and cybersecurity, and how devastating the impact is, and really realized that it was the cybersecurity profession that had a real opportunity to step in and fill that gap. And really had that concept of a movement profession to try and help.
And so when you started the Cyber Helpline, was this just kind of a labor of love, or did you have funding, friends? Like, how did it start up?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a labor of love at the start. I'd been in cybersecurity since university, essentially. Had been in the industry for a long time. Ended up in this cybersecurity that was part of an investment portfolio of a merchant bank. And one of the other things they had was a private office. So they were working with a lot of ultra high net worth individuals, the rich and famous, essentially, providing a whole range of services from, where to park your super yacht to how to get tickets for events, that kind of thing. They also had lots of businesses and another part of the business. So I was there to help security consultancy for these small, medium businesses. But these individuals kept coming to us and saying, I've got this. And at first I was a bit dismissive, just go to the police, it'll be fine, you'll get sorted. And they kept coming back and kept coming back and saying, we haven't heard anything, nobody's helping us. And so we started looking into this area of how do you help individuals? Why aren't they being helped somewhere else? And what does it take to actually deal with some of these issues? Because they're different. There's corporate cybersecurity issues, and then there's the types of issues individuals might face, which include cyber stalking, revenge porn, these more human issues. And so at that point, took a step back and said, somebody needs to do something here. The gap in support is just too big, and had this kind of crazy moment of, why don't we just put up a website, offer help, and I'll go and get some mates in the industry and we'll see if we can help some people. And that was 5 years ago, and it's been a really busy, interesting 5 years since then.
About how many people or cases have you worked on since then?
So since we took our first case around 5 years ago, we've now probably opened over 28 to 30,000 cases, individual cases. We're currently opening around 2,000 cases a month. And I think our biggest ever month in terms of cases opened was around 2,500. So we've gone from putting up that website and the first case coming through the kind of online form to having built all sorts of maturity and ability to scale. But we're continuing to see lots of demand and growing pretty quickly.
And is this worldwide, just UK?
So we started in the UK, and for the first 4.5 years, we've been UK only. And we have a kind of range of ways people can get help. They can use our helpline, which is our volunteer cybersecurity experts. We also have lots of online guidance for each type of attack somebody might face, and a chat bot that can help them walk through that process. And we've always made the chatbot and the website available to anyone
Mhm.
because people across the globe are suffering from very similar types of attacks. We've limited the actual helpline itself to the UK because of how much funding we have, but also because of the local knowledge needed to get really good outcomes for victims. But over the last couple of months, we've actually just started a pilot in the US. So we are working out right now how we localize our advice and our
Mhm.
help for the US market. We're starting to take some cases there, And then the plan is, as we get deeper into that pilot, we will start offering the service in the US essentially. So right from day one, 5 years ago, we put the website up. We had lots of people from all over the world asking for help because globally that gap in support exists,
Yeah.
essentially.
So, has there been a trend in kind of the most common scams or cybersecurity issues that you work with?
Yeah, definitely. And there's definitely some seasonality and changes, but there's also some real constants in what we see. When we started designing the service, we thought, okay, this is probably going to be fraud and scams, probably going to be malicious software, and maybe some kind of hacks that we'll have to deal with. So we went off and thought, what's our advice here? What's the playbook we're going to use? And we were essentially, and the first 10, 20, 50 cases that came in, these really complex kind of technology meets the human world type attacks. They were cyber stalking, they were online harassment, they were revenge porn and sextortion, bullying. And so what's been really interesting over the last 5 years is getting a real understanding of how do individuals actually fall victim to
Hmm.
these things. Because we see in the press, 1 million accounts hacked over here, people have lost, $400 million or pounds. But actually, that's not the story of cybercrime. The true story of cybercrime and online harm is ex-partners, stalking previous partners. It's images being shared. It's a real impact on mental health. So I would say that about a third of what we do is cyber stalking, it's online harassment. And I'd say the big other areas, we see a lot of hacked accounts, we see a lot of fraud and scams, but it's really either kind of professional criminal gangs running sextortion scams, or it's other people harassing, stalking, each other. And then we see this real seasonality in attack types where, in the UK and I'm sure in the US too, the impact of COVID has had quite a big impact in terms of the economy. Inflation's really high, wages are really low. So there's a real crisis here. And so what we've seen for the last 3 or 6 months is a huge rise in loan scams,
Hmm.
tricking people into pay fees to take out loans. And we've seen a huge rise in job fraud. So, pretending people are getting jobs, getting them to pay for visas or for vetting, and then there's obviously no job. But also around government support for energy bills and other areas because they're sending out these things by text. So obviously the criminals send it out by text a couple of days before, and millions of people get scammed. So we have these real themes of the hacked accounts, the fraud, the scams, but also these really complex human issues, and then the seasonality of cyber criminals being good at marketing and taking
Yeah.
advantage of opportunities.
Yeah, whenever there's a whatever the government program is or a marketing program, they will definitely seize on that and leverage that to their own abilities.
Yeah, I mean, I like to say that cyber criminals aren't particularly good at cyber, but they're excellent at marketing. And you don't have to be technical as a cyber criminal targeting the general public because the bar of protection is relatively low.
Yeah.
What you have to be really good at is understanding what is going to make that individual act to do what you want them to do. Click a link, share some money. And that used to be the sob story by email. Now it's tricking somebody into sharing a naked photo. Whatever it is that will make that person act and part with their money. They're very good at understanding those human behaviors.
Are there certain things that they're using or methodologies that they're using to get people to take action, regardless of whether it's a government a faking a government program or faking a package?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we've seen a lot is hack social media accounts and email accounts being used to then scam the people in their network.
Hmm.
And so, you hack someone's social media account, you contact all of the people in their DMs, and you talk about an investment opportunity, you ask for money. You've broken that barrier of suspicion if you can mimic how they communicate and make it look roughly legitimate. So we've seen a lot of that, or using that social media account to do some research. So if I can find that person's mother's name and their phone number, then I can text them and say, "Hey, I've lost my phone. This is a new number. I'm in trouble. I need £300 sent to this account." So you break that barrier by having that connection and extra research. What we're also seeing in terms of investment scams, particularly virtual currency investment,
Yeah.
is it's not just hey, buy some virtual currency and the money goes missing. It's buy some virtual currency on this platform that the criminal has created. It looks like a investment platform. You can see your investment, you can see the value of your investment. You've got an account manager who's sometimes texting you, although usually on WhatsApp, which is, I guess, a red flag. But you think you've got an investment, you think it's going well, you get really excited, they ask you for more money, you put more money in. The problem comes when you try and take money out.
Yeah.
And that's when there's interesting taxes or fees you have to pay to release that money. And at some point, that whole platform goes offline and your money's gone missing. So there's definitely more investment in the tools that people are engaging with, whether it's fake websites, whether it's fake investment platforms. But generally, what we're seeing is non-technical people using everyday technology malicious. So it's an ex-partner who's got access to the iCloud and can see location and photos. It's people using social media accounts to stalk someone. It's very rare we see something super high tech,
Hmm.
but our technical ability allows us to troubleshoot and understand what actually is happening and what action we can take.
So, with regards to the troubleshooting, I know I definitely get a lot of people contacting me about. I think my ex is has control over my phone and is cyber stalking me on my phone, and then they'll send me screenshots of open source licenses and things like that. Which my general view is I think they're misunderstanding the technology and seeing things that they don't understand, and they're just automatically assuming that must be the cyber stalking. So, what are some of the things that you look at as yes, this is cyber stalking versus someone not under they may be being cyber stalk, but what they're seeing is just no, that's just the underlying technology of your phone, and you're misunderstanding what you're seeing.
Yeah, it's a really good question because there's a couple of things at play here. One, when you feel like you are being cyberstalked and you feel that there is a threat actor out there monitoring you, who may be there to harm you, you can develop what's called hypervigilance. So you are just always switched on. You are constantly aware that the stalker might be there. And when you don't have technical understanding, anything that happens becomes part of the stalking.
Yeah.
So, the printer reboots or the kettle makes a funny noise, and it can be bizarre things. You look out the window and the lamppost flickers, and all of a sudden, the hypervigilance leads to that individual thinking that that must be part of the stalking. The stalker must be high tech. They've got access to the lamppost somehow. And that makes it really tricky, one for the individual because they're exhausted because they
Yeah.
feel everything around them is hacked and compromised and they can't escape the technology. Two, it makes it hard for them to get believed. So police officer comes to the door and they say, "Hey, I think the stalker's got access to the lamppost," and they immediately think, "Okay, this person's struggling with their mental health," and so they don't get that immediate access to help that they
Hmm.
should. And so technical understanding, I think, is the biggest hole that we fill for people. Because the other factor here is that what you read in the news And what you see in terms of the cybercrime that is covered is usually nation state.
Yeah.
There's these big things, and people don't understand that while that is possible, it's highly, highly improbable that your ex-boyfriend, who's a plumber, is using a nation state malware to stalk you. And so often what we are doing is saying, okay, let's look at the facts and let's find the facts. So often we are saying, what does your online footprint look like? What devices do you have? What accounts do you have? What other technology is involved in your life? And we get a history of what that stalker has been doing or what they perceive that stalker has been doing. And we basically go through a process of elimination. Okay, well, let's look at, you've got a Gmail account. Let's look at this Gmail account and go and follow a checklist of indicators of compromise that we would look for. And through that process, we can identify what is actually compromised. But we can also go through a process of elimination around how did that person get that information?
Hmm.
Okay, well, where does that information exist? Who else have you told? Because it's often the simplest explanation that's true. So we usually have to take them down from a high tech, hyper vigilance place down to okay, it's not malicious software. It's that they've got access to your iCloud account because it's your ex-partner and they know the password, or you shared it online here, but you didn't realize you were sharing it. So
Yeah.
you can put that timeline. And that obviously helps them a lot because it puts their mind at rest. It gives them something they can focus on and control because it's that unknown, which is the horrible bit.
Yeah.
When you don't know who it is, how they're doing it, and what they're doing, it's just terrorizing essentially. So it's really tough.
And it doesn't help that every crime television show that has a cybercrime angle, the lone individual has the nation state hacker tools and in 3 seconds can compromise the doorbell that isn't Wi-Fi connected, and all these other things.
Yeah, and that's the narrative, isn't it? The narrative that you see in the news on TV is this really exciting, interesting lone wolf or professional outfit who can, change ships' directions in a second and cause an international incident. When actually, what we've got to understand relatively quickly in a case is who do we think the threat actor might be and what is their capability? Now, this person works in cybersecurity, then we're going to look at that in a different way. But if they're not in the IT world, immediately it doesn't remove it, but it lowers the chance of highly technical going on. And so there's usually a more simple explanation. So it's trying to take them away. And the other challenge to that is what we often see too is that remember that the police aren't technical either.
Yeah.
They're not IT experts. And so they're reading the same things in the press. So sometimes when they're talking to a victim who's reporting a crime or an issue, a cyber crime, the police officer might say, "Oh, yeah, I read an article about a nation state attack on Apple devices. Maybe it's that." And it fuels this kind of process. And so yeah, it's getting people in front of the right people at the right time who understand what's happening can make such a difference.
And I suppose there's also an impact on the opposite side in terms of with those crime shows, you see that the crime scene investigators are able to, like, in 3 seconds go, oh, that IP address is assigned to Rory, and he's currently driving his car southbound on this freeway. Let's send someone out right now.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've got any experience with the evidence collection process in the US, but in the UK, they might take your mobile phone and have it for 8 months
Yeah.
before they even look at it because there's such a backlog in demand. And so you'd have to be on a very, very long car journey to get it caught in the
Yeah.
act in that moment. So, and that's another challenge too, because if a police officer does want to seize your mobile phone and you are 16 and they say, one, we're going to look through your phone. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was 16 and the police said, I want to look through everything on your phone, I'd probably be pretty unhappy about it.
Yeah.
But two, if the police officer also says to you, you might not get this phone back for 8 months, that's also going to be pretty unappealing to a 16-year-old or to pretty much anyone.
Yeah.
And so part of the challenge we have is one, how long it takes, but two, how appealing that is for victims who just want it solved and want to move on. They're not interested in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is boring for the general public, but it gets really exciting when something goes wrong. But
Yeah.
they just want to move out the other side and get back to their life again. And so we just don't have the services, the capability, the resources in law enforcement and the wider community to do that. And it's what makes the problem worse. And it's also what brings rise to things like recovery scams.
Yeah.
The scammer phones you up 3 days later, pretends to be the police, and scams you again. And because they know the police will not have been in touch in that time frame. So there's lots of areas for us to work on to get better.
So, when it comes to, because I don't have the time to dedicate, you know, 4 hours, let's say, to helping a specific individual and being on the phone with them the entire time. Myself and other people often will, I hate to say that, will simplify the advice in order to, let me give you something that will most likely most likely help you. But because I haven't been able to do the work to identify, yes, this really is a hack versus a stalker versus you're just seeing things that aren't there because you're worried about some history that's happened with this individual, does things like telling the person, well, just wipe the phone, reinstall the OS, change all your passwords, install a password manager, two-factor authentication, kind of the bare bones simplified device. Does that actually work for a lot of people on the technical side and then on the perception side?
Yeah, so this is really, really interesting because cyberstalking is a great example of this. So while cyberstalking is probably a third of what we do, and we do lots of other stuff, it's one of the most complex types of cases that we take because it's ongoing. There's lots of risk. There's an active threat actor, so you've got all these elements to it, which is really tricky. The advice that most commonly victims will get when they go to a stalking service, who are not technical but awesome at dealing with stalking, or the police, is, hey, just change your passwords, block them, factory reset your device, and see what happens. It's actually some of the worst advice you can give because, one, you factory reset that device, there's using any evidence that you've got on it. And so if the police do come for that device and want to do that investigation, it can make it really tricky. It can also make it really tricky for the victim to tell their story because the timeline and the events and the content of messages, documents,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, can be lost. But also, you've got to remember that stalking is about obsession. And so the person on the other side is obsessed with this individual. And they might only have one or access online to that person. They might have access to their email account. They might be a friend on their Facebook page. If you remove those things, the danger is that you don't remove the obsession, you just remove the access.
Yeah.
So, what if the stalker changes their behavior and that behavior becomes more risky? So, instead of now they can't see you on Facebook and they can't read your emails, they turn up at your office and follow you home. And so what's been really interesting is that nobody teaches you in a computer science degree or in a corporate office how to deal with cyber stalking if you're in the IT security team. So we've had to really sit down and understand stalking, work with some stalking charities, work with some academics in the space, work with some other kind of people in the area, and actually define not just how do we help people with cyber stalking in terms of looking for online compromise and dealing with that, but how do we keep them safe while we're doing it? Because one, if the stalker knows we're there, we don't want them to escalate their behavior and feel like they're running out of time. And you can move the stalker into this mode of what's called finality thinking, as
Hmm.
in I've got to do this now, or I'm never going to be able to do it again, which increases the danger. And so all of this is about, one, how do we help them understand the compromise? How do we keep them safe and stop it getting any worse? And so that safeguarding element becomes really important. But then it's, how do you help them recover?
Yeah.
And the police's job isn't to help you get your device secure again. It's to look for evidence and try and prosecute someone for doing something. But remember, the impact of cybercrime isn't just technical. It's mental health, it's online confidence, it's feeling safe at home. It is financial because often they've bought lots of devices and done lots of things. And so part of our job is to, one, get them to a point where they feel safe online again. They have some security, they have some privacy, but also they build some confidence in being online again.
Hmm.
And so, how do we empower them through the process to be able to spot compromise, to know what to do when it happens, so they at least feel they will know what to look out for in future? So yeah, it's really interesting because it started off as a bunch of techies
Yeah.
essentially trying to do technical things, and very quickly it moved into a bunch of people of all sorts of backgrounds trying to deal with this really large problem.
So, from a big picture perspective, what are some of the things that you and your team do to help people kind of regain that confidence of being able to be online and feel secure in that?
Yeah, and so I think this is the biggest benefit that we give people. The other is probably helping them collect evidence and have some credibility with the police and push for investigations. But I think actually the big benefit is empowering those individuals to feel safe and secure online. And so I think that starts right at the beginning of our service. So our model is what we call an assisted self-help model.
Hmm.
So we don't remote desktop into your machine. We don't sign into your Google account and play around. What we do is take you through a process where we empower you to take those actions with our guidance. So you might tell us what your accounts and devices are and what your online footprint looks like. And we might highlight some areas that we want to go and investigate, but we'll give you the instruction. We'll be sitting over your shoulder, kind of listening and watching and helping you make decisions and understand what you're looking at. And so, because they're taking the action and they're the proactive person looking and putting the protections in place, it gives them that skill set of, okay, well, now I realize in my email account there's a section where I can see recent logins and
Yeah.
failed logins. So now I know I don't have to just worry about it. I can check. And two, they realize because they've set up a stronger password, they've turned on two factor, they've done these other things we've put in place, that they have the knowledge of how to do those things. And I think the other bit to that is it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is that lack of technical understanding and kind of hypervigilance.
Hmm.
Sometimes just going through that process and understanding what is possible, what is incredibly unlikely, and what's not possible can help them go through that triage process themselves. Okay, so he's probably not hacked the lamppost outside my house. It's probably just a coincidence. Or, if my printer does this, it's a normal thing for my printer to do. And so that also helps as they go through the process.
Hmm.
The other flip side to that is that's also really hard. If you are being stalked and you are scared of the stalker and they've been stalking you through technology, someone like us saying, oh, hey, can you look at all your devices and check for all these compromise, can be really daunting and really scary. And so helping that individual um, by going at their own pace, by giving them the right support, and by trying to really minimize the actions they have to take at each step
Hmm.
also really helps. Because I think the one of the big challenges we have right now with law enforcement and other places is that we're asking people who are being targeted online to report online, and find all the evidence online and then report it online again. That person really doesn't want to be online at that point in time. They're terrified of being online. So the user engagement model will probably have to change for the whole approach. Um, but yeah, I think, just to sum up on that question, I think really empowering the user and making them part of the solution really leads to that confidence coming back.
Mhm. So you were talking about the kind of the mental health impacts of cybercrime, stalking, scams, and whatnot. Do you provide services in that space also, or is that something that you more frequently refer out to?
Yeah, we mostly refer, but we do a bunch of things in our service to make us aware of what we're hearing and what we
Hmm.
should do next. Now, we ask all of our victims when they come to us, or service users when they come to us, how is this issue impacting you? And we look at areas like financial, like mental health, like physical health, online confidence, personal safety, impact on family members, and others. So we have all these areas that we've identified are key impact areas. And we ask them to, one, score them out of 10. And then we ask them to provide a statement around that number. Why have you scored this 10? And what's really interesting is that having been in the industry for a long time, you always see it through a financial lens. How much has someone lost? And that's what gets reported. It's what the police report. This many victims have lost this much money. And so it was really interesting for us when we look at 26,000 people who filled that out, that financial loss is almost always bottom out of the categories.
Mm.
Even if they've lost significant money, it's often not the top area. It's mental health and online confidence. So they are the two big things. And so we understood that really early when we started talking to victims and realized that while we're not a mental health service and we don't plan to be, we have to understand how to listen and speak with vulnerable users. We have to understand what the red flags are that we should be watching out for. And we need to have really good safeguarding procedures in place so that if we do think that individual is a danger to themselves or others, we know what to do with it. Um, and we have the right partners where we can refer and right procedures.
Hmm.
That was hard too, because again, a bunch of techies
Yeah,
wanting to help with technical things,
not your
having,
space.
yeah, just not your space. And so part of that is also in our recruitment, so we have some of our volunteers are on the front line, who have some of those skills and we can train and some of those skills. Others are kind of second, third line. They're a specialist in ransomware and they can be contacted on the help desk and come into a case and provide technical expertise, but not do the front line bit working with the victim. So we've had to kind of build that knowledge and intelligence and procedure into the service as we've gone forward essentially.
It's really interesting because when you talk about the mental health aspects, the financial, the number lost is less important to people. It's interesting because there isn't a quantifiable mental health impact metric that you can report.
Yeah.
You can report on the number of incidents, the accounts compromised, the number of dollars lost or pounds lost or currency,
Yeah.
but you can't really count, well, how many friends did you lose over this? Uh,
Yeah.
you know, how have your relationships degraded because of this? Honest,
Yeah.
well,
And well, think about this. Somebody steals your phone, which maybe cost you $1,000, but on that phone was a video of you naked, and that is now on social media being shared. That $1,000 phone loss is pretty insignificant now
yeah.
compared to this video of you online and somebody asking you for $5,000 to take that video down. And so you're right. I think luckily the issue of mental health and the impact of mental health is something that just as a society we are getting better at,
Yeah.
although still not there, I think. I think that in the UK in particular, mental health services are extremely busy and extremely underfunded. And so that can be a challenge too, in those people accessing the help they need when they need it. Um, but I think that even something as simple as an individual clicking on a phishing link and losing £200, those individuals, £200 is a lot of money to, almost everyone,
Yeah.
but to lots of people. But it's the feelings of shame and being tricked and being stupid. And, I've done something wrong. It's my fault.
Yeah.
And the isolation of that, which can make it really tricky. Or, it's a 15-year-old boy who's being targeted online and he doesn't want to tell his school, he doesn't want to tell his parents, certainly doesn't want to walk into a police station and talk about it. And so it's that isolation and challenge that we need to change the way people feel about these things, how easy it is to report, how we support them when they report, instead of saying, hey, cool, here's a crime reference number. You'll never hear from us again. Good luck. And
Yeah.
so there's lots of work to do there, I think.
So do you think some of it is some of the issues around the shame of being a victim of cybercrime is that they don't feel, well, gee, if I was a cybersecurity expert, this wouldn't have happened to me, and because I don't hear cybersecurity experts talking about they being victims of cybercrime, then it's about me, not about the crime itself.
Yeah, you see the reasons differ by demographics, I think.
Hmm.
These are massive generalizations, but for the older kind of population, they feel they don't understand technology. It's their fault. They've been stupid, they've been tricked, they're embarrassed about it, but they blame themselves because of their technical acumen,
Hmm.
essentially, um, and their nervousness just generally about being online. I think I think as you get to the problems that exist in the kind of younger generations, that feeling of embarrassment and shame is much more tied to friendships, relationships, sex, because a lot of what we're seeing is revenge porn, sextortion, it's harassment, it's shaming people online, and that obviously is embarrassing, and it's bullying, and it's harassment. But if I'm 40 years old, so I didn't grow up with the internet and technology, but it was relatively early in my life, probably 18, when I was online and had an email account. But younger kids today, their online identity is inseparable from their offline
Yeah.
identity. And so if you kind of taint that online world and their online friendships, and there is information out there about them online, it's easy for the older generation to say, oh, hey, don't worry about it. It's just social media, everyone forget about it. It just doesn't work like that. And so
Hmm.
the impact on mental health, on isolation, on just ability to go about their day-to-day lives completely changes. And so I do think that as we help different segments of the population, and sometimes also different religions and beliefs and other things with our sensitivities about what people have been doing online, whether it's gambling and whatever, we have to be really mindful of where they are and what the online world means to them and what the
Hmm.
impact is in the offline world. So that's what's so challenging about it. As you say, there's no metric that I am aware of for impact on mental health, and it's a tough area to really deeply understand. For a helpline like us, but it's undoubtedly the big forgotten impact of cybercrime.
Hmm. So, in the hopes of working towards destigmatizing those that have been a victim of cybercrime, I'll ask you the question: have you been a victim of cybercrime?
Yeah, absolutely, and more than once. And I think that any of us, any of us who are online will have been targeted, whether it's social engineering, whether it's malicious software, whether it's, online bullying or whatever. But I remember being really embarrassed about mine at the time. And not because it was particularly embarrassing, just because of this scenario. And I was at university, I did a student placement in a cybersecurity firm, and they were a kind of cybersecurity consultancy that had just started up managed security services, running a security operations center um, for other companies. And I wasn't particularly technical. I was doing a marketing degree. And, so I was kind of like trying to catch up on all the cybersecurity stuff and the terminology and pretty new to technology myself. And so, you want to put your best foot forward and look like you know what you're talking about. And I had just moved to London. This company was based in Edinburgh. I just moved to London and I was flat hunting and I was on a site called Gumtree, which I think is very similar to like Craigslist,
Yeah.
maybe in the US. And just clicking through adverts for rooms to rent, flats to rent, and I clicked on one advert, and whatever downloaded onto my machine was obviously malware, but it just absolutely melted the machine. I mean, there was just nothing I could do.
Oh,
I realized really quickly, one, there was nothing I could do. Two, that this device was probably not going to be usable very quickly. And three, I was going to have to phone work and say, I'm really sorry. I know I work for a cybersecurity firm, but I've clicked on a malicious link online and now my laptop doesn't work. And so it kind of reinforces cyber criminals being good at marketing.
yeah.
Where are people clicking? Where are they going? Where do they feel safe clicking? Go there, and that's where you'll have your success. Um, but there's lots of other instances, and I think over the last 30 years of being online, something has popped up
Yeah.
every. And now I have young children. Now I'm constantly thinking about how do I keep them safe online, less from cybercrime, but more from harmful content. And so I'm sure there'll be more, instances in my life as we go forward.
Yeah, it's definitely a new world for parenting. Although maybe every generation can say that, but it seems to me like there's so many fundamental shifts in parenting
Yeah, we get
with
asked all of the time, what advice would you give to parents? And it's really interesting because the answer is completely non-technical. It's talk to them
Yep.
about the dangers online and make it really, really clear that if something bad happens online or something scary, they see something scary online that makes them upset, then they can come to you and not get in trouble. Because it's the saddest thing we deal with, I think, on top of all big sad things like cyber stalking and the devastation of people's lives, is young children who've been targeted who just feel they cannot talk to their parents because they'll get in trouble. Um, and actually, if you can almost guarantee them an open door, you won't get in trouble. Let's chat about it. I
Yeah.
might give you some pointers on how to do better in future, but you won't be in trouble. It would just make life so much easier. So it's just education and making sure they feel comfortable coming to you if something goes wrong.
Yeah, I'm sure. So if people specifically in the UK are looking for help, where can they go?
Yeah, so the website is the cyberhelpline.com. And so on the website, you will see two things that will be really useful. One, we have web guides. So the kind of approach we go through for each of our 40, 50 different types of attacks, we have those methodologies on the website. So it will literally say, if you're suffering from this, here's step one, here's step two, here's step three. So if you want to do that yourself without coming to talk to us, then you can use those online. We also have a bot where we've built some kind of interesting technology on the site where you can describe what's happened to you in your own language and it will identify it and then walk you through the process. Because a lot of people do want to remain anonymous
Yeah.
and they're getting help from us for there's a lot of the reasons we've talked about. But also, that's the way using our website, you'll get access to one of our volunteers. So if you end up on the cyberhelpline.com, then you'll be able to access any of our help essentially.
So for those outside of the UK, they can still use the chatbot, use all the guides. You're just not going to be able to provide them personal support.
Yeah, exactly. So you'll get access to the chatbot, you'll get access to the guide, so you'll be able to self-help, what we call our self-help service. If you're in the US, then it's probably relatively soon that we'll start accepting cases and helping people locally. And what you'll also see in the coming months is those web guides and chatbot being localized to the US. The attacks are very similar. But how you get help, how you interface with law
Yeah,
enforcement, the laws in the various states. So all of those things just need taken into account when we think about the advice that we give. So that will also help until we get those US volunteers up and running.
gotcha. And if anyone wants to connect with you specifically, is there a way for them to do that through LinkedIn or something?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You can also come through the website, has a kind of contact us form, which will end up with me at some point if you're asking to kind of connect with me. So those are probably the two best ways to get in touch. And we're really open to collaboration because this isn't a space we're going to solve on our own.
Yeah,
It's a complex area. Partnerships are really important. Volunteers are important. Donors are even more important. And so, all those people can come forward and talk to us about how they might support the mission.
that's great. Rory, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey podcast today.
Thank you. It's been really good to chat.